Nestled in the Himalayan mountains, between India to the west and Tibet to the north, lies the Kingdom of Bhutan. Its geographic isolation led to its reputation as a hidden land of spiritual treasures and nourished a unique culture steeped in Buddhist spiritual values for centuries. We are traveling with Robert Thurman on his 6th expedition to Bhutan, an outer and inner journey to explore the Buddhist ideas that shape the land of the Thunder Dragon, Druk Yul as it is called in Dzongkha, the Bhutanese language. Robert's journey into Buddhism began when he lost his left eye in an accident and started to look deeper into life. He traveled and studied with Tenzin Gyatso, the 14th Dalai Lama, and became the first Westerner to be ordained a Tibetan Buddhist monk in 1964. After several years, he gave up the monastery for the university. Today, he is a professor of Indo-Tibetan Studies at Columbia University in New York and president of Tibet House US. Until the early 1960s, Bhutan was accessible only by trekking through the Himalayan mountains. But today, we fly Druk Air Royal Bhutan Airlines into the town of Paro. Our journey together begins 2,300 feet up a sheer granite cliff at Taksang Lakang, the Tiger's Nest, the sacred temple of the most revered monastery in Bhutan. This is also where the story of Buddhism begins in Bhutan, built around the cave where Padmasambhava, also known as Guru Rinpoche, arrived from Tibet on the back of a flying tigress and meditated. Padmasambhava brought with him the Buddhist Dharma and hid a number of treasured teachings throughout the region that were found later by spiritual seekers. The story of Padmasambhava's arrival might seem unbelievable, but this equally unlikely temple makes you wonder.
Padmasambhava was said to have been born from the tongue of the Buddha Amitabha, from the heaven of Sukhavati, the Western paradise. It's a land of total bliss, where Amitabha, the boundless light Buddha, dwells. And Avalokiteshvara, his main disciple, was there, and he was scolding the Buddha, saying, why couldn't the Buddha do something about this terrible situation down on Earth? It was going to be this big, Holocaust would go on, just because some king couldn't have a son. So Amitabha stuck out his tongue in response. And then this rainbow meteor came shooting out of his tongue, shot down across the galaxies and the universes, and landed in a lake near the front of the palace of the king. And then this lotus sprung from that lake, and in the lotus there was this 5-year-old boy, and there were 4 little other beings around him in a sort of retinue. And the minister of the king discovered this boy and said, "Oh, your majesty, here's your son, miraculously born." And so then everything, the disaster was averted. Eventually he goes off and he becomes a yogi, and he becomes a Buddha, becomes a Siddha, he becomes many things. And he lives for 1,000 years. And then he eventually goes to Tibet, all through the Himalayan region, and everywhere where there are sort of local deities and tribal cults and whatever it is, he tames them all, and he converts the deities actually to practice Buddhism, practice the Dharma. And then once the deities are practicing the Dharma, then the people want to. And he had at different times during his career, he had 2 main consorts, one Tibetan one and one Bengali one, Mandalava. And I think the Bengali one was the one who turned into a tigress at one point and flew up here. It's actually the tigress lair. The tigress is really the tigress of wisdom, because the female is always wisdom. And so she flies because of wisdom. Guru Rinpoche is the compassion, the fierce compassion, love, bliss. But the wisdom is the vehicle. And when she turned into a tigress, he turned into the form of the diamond big belly, is literally Vajra Doje Dole, his name is. And very ferocious with sort of fangs and holding that scorpion dagger and a vajra. And so he's seen to be a kind of like a very dynamic and rather fierce emanation. He's an emanation of fierce compassion. So there's the presence of this, and in the cave like this that we are, the presence of sort of therefore the fierce, radiant, rainbow energied compassion.
We now head east through Bhutan, stopping at Dochala, a mountain pass featuring 108 chortens or stupas, spiritual monuments that echo the perfect proportions of the Buddha's body. In Buddhism, the number 108 represents the number of obstacles one must overcome to attain enlightenment. In this teaching, Dr. Thurman explains the Four Noble Truths, the central teachings of the Buddha, more a method of education than a system of beliefs.
Buddha rebelled against the Brahmanic Vedic Brahmanism of his time that had a pantheon of gods and even had a creator idea about the god Brahma. And he rebelled against that, and he said, I don't really buy it. And he went off and he looked into the nature of the world, and supposedly he came up with this preposterous conclusion, from the point of view of modern Western ideas, that he understood everything perfectly well. That's what Buddha means. He became a Buddha, meaning one who awoke to the nature of the world, what it is, what he was, what the world was, what everybody was, what their lives, where they were, how they're going to go in the future, the nature of what makes people suffering and what makes them happy. Completely, perfectly understood that. Like, in a way, like the super Einstein or something, super scientist, which is not really believable to most people. And then he even said, Eureka, I understand everything, but you don't have to believe that, he said to people. It's not necessary. I don't insist that you believe that. In fact, I would be against it if you believed it unreasonably. Because the way I understand it is by using my reason and my experiment and my mind looking at the world. And why I'm happy about it is that you can also understand it that way, using your mind and your reasoning and your experience, evaluating and looking critically at your experience. And so, and when you begin to, so I have some methods I will give you. If you use those methods and you find you're improving your understanding and you're becoming more happy, then you can begin to give me a little credibility based on what you experience. But you don't have, so that's really wonderful. Like, Eureka, I know everything. You don't have to believe it. In fact, believing it won't help you. You have to try to work on your own mind the way that I'll recommend. And if you find that helps your mind, then you'll find yourself being more happy. So it's like a method of education. Because education means bringing out of the people's minds what they themselves are capable of understanding. And it means helping them become more critical of the delusions that are blocking their understanding. And the Four Noble Truths are the basic pattern of Buddhism, basically, of the Buddhist education, you could say. And the first Noble Truth is called the Noble Truth of Suffering. That means that the unenlightened life is suffering. Now, unenlightened people don't think so. Not everything about it. Like, I don't think so. As long as I'm not freezing to death or dying or starving and there's some chocolate and there's Brent to tell us where to go, I'm not suffering. I'm happy. When I start getting like really hungry or diarrhea or whatever, then I'm suffering. So I think I go back and forth. But for the noble person who has a deeper realization, all of my own experience as an ignorant, unenlightened person is essentially suffering. My temporary happiness of feeling satisfied with this or that is not really happiness, because very soon it gives way to suffering. Because I'm hungry again very shortly. You know what I mean? I'm comparing my happiness with some other happiness that's not going to be good enough, and I'm dissatisfied, etc. So, but that's a noble person knows that. The ordinary unenlightened person doesn't. So we just seek temporary relief all the time. And we eventually, of course, we get despair then if we realize that none of it is really that great. But we don't think there's any alternative, so we become resigned to it. But Buddha told us that there is an alternative, and all the people in the movement are people who discover the alternative. So the first noble truth is that. Then the second is the cause of suffering. What is the cause? Second noble truth. Each one of us Now, some of you may be enlightened, I wouldn't know, because I'm unenlightened. So if I'm, rude and I'm assuming you're like me, I apologize. But since you're enlightened, you don't care, so I don't mind. So the point is, each one of us lives a certain way. We think that we're real, right? Like in the Matrix, We don't know we're in the Matrix. We think we're the real one. When we read Descartes, we think that's true. I think, therefore I am, right? Each one of us also is over there. You're over there inside your skin. I'm over here in my skin. The rest of the world is different than me. It's self and other. And that's why you feel good when you're pregnant in some parts of the time. Because you're two people for a while. So there's two of you who are against the universe. But the point is, usually it's just one of us against the whole universe. Right? Because I'm real, I'm me, I'm more important too. Each one thinks. When you're in the bus, who's in the best seat? Is it me? No. Maybe you jump in that seat. I take that seat. Then later somebody else sits over there and they look happier. Oh, no. How do you get the seat? We're each of us the more important. And that makes us paranoid, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's paranoid. Why? Because we all know nobody else agrees with us. Not only do you not think I'm the most important, but you think I should be thinking you're the most important. So we're like loggerheads, right? Now, if you're at loggerheads with every other being in the entire universe, how are you going to manage? Right? That's going to be suffering. In that struggle of you versus the universe, you're going to suffer. The cause of suffering is the false sense of self and feeling that you are the absolute real thing, and therefore that you're the most important thing, and therefore running into conflict with the universe forever. That's the second noble truth. And that's because that's the cause. Okay? Now the third noble truth is not the critique of the cause, but the third noble truth is the encouragement. And again, it's not true except for a noble person. And that is, the third noble truth is that there is such a thing as nirvana, which is not nothingness. It's not extinguishing yourself. It's not obliterating yourself at all. Nirvana is bliss. He says Buddha at first he kind of said to some people, well, it's just a freedom from suffering. But what is freedom from suffering? Is that happiness or what? I think so. But he didn't say right away. You know why? Because people are so inured to their misery that if you go around and say, hey, really, what you really are is bliss, they're going to think you want to pick their pocket or something. I mean, they're going to get all suspicious, what is that? That's impossible. That's unrealistic. I'm miserable, I know I am, and nobody's going to take it away from me. Right? So he just says a cessation of the suffering. And then when people get really seriously suffering, then they want to have it cease. So then they can get into that type of thing. And he doesn't emphasize the bliss part of nirvana, but let's face it, nirvana is bliss. Oh. Now, that bliss is nirvana is not an unrealistic bliss that you're going to find in Bhutan if you get on top of one of the mountains or something. That bliss of nirvana is the actual reality of this here right now. We're all in nirvana now. Because it's the reality of the world is nirvana. Otherwise, why tell people about it? If it wasn't the reality that is accessible to us, and why is it accessible to us? Because it is our actual nature. Our nature is nirvana. The true nature of the world is nirvana. Samsara is how the world is experienced under delusion. When you're ignorant, you think it's a samsara because I'm struggling against it. When you're enlightened, you realize that it's perfectly all right. It's nirvana, the world is. Because you're not against other beings. You are the other beings. You're all together in a whole thing. And you're also not against the ground or the element earth or the worms or the germs or anything. It's all you. You're all one vast entity. And that's a blissful entity. That's what the realization, that's the third noble truth. Now, that's just one thing to proclaim it. Then there's the question of, well, then how do we get from the first noble truth, suffering, to the third, bliss? How do we do that? That's the fourth noble truth, the path. Path has 8 branches. Most important of the 8 branches, and then those 8 branches are divided into 3 things. And the 3 things are education, higher education in ethics, higher education in meditation or in mind, and higher education in wisdom. The 8 branches divided into those 3. But of those 3, the wisdom is the one. Because the only way that you get free of suffering, you move from the first noble truth to the third, is by understanding that there's no need to suffer. because the world is bliss, the world is nirvana. But it's all very well to say that, but then you don't believe it really. So you then have to use your mind, and you have to develop a concentration to use your mind better, and you have to live ethically to stop having people trying to, fighting with people all the time, to get more harmonious and peaceful in your way of living. And so those are preparing, and then what you really have to do is your mind has to break through the shell of ignorance, and you realize the nature of the world, and you realize that it's nirvana. Okay? So that's as simple as that. Isn't it? But it may take time, but it's actually not that difficult. So that's Buddhism, okay? So then all that we are meditating, the path that we are doing when we do meditation, is we are sort of reminding ourselves of that being. And we're looking at the different themes, how over the centuries, in India and in Tibet and in Bhutan, how they sort of streamlined that path to sort of give us the main points that we need to reflect on, which if we do, will give us a good shot at critiquing all of the wrong ideas that we have that block us from realizing our natural happiness. Go into meditative mode. We turn our mind to the beginning theme, which is the theme of reflecting on how incredibly fortunate we are as human beings to have this marvelous mind and body that we have, where we can learn, we can overcome our instinctual reactions and our negative mentalities and our ignorance and our greed and our hatred and irritation and envy and confusion and delusion. We can develop wisdom and love and friendliness and generosity and so forth and humility. It isn't a matter of where we're supposed to just believe something that we don't believe, like believe in the infinite beginningless previous lives we've had, believe in reincarnation, people call it in English. It's a matter of assessing what we do believe, actually. It's a matter of realizing how what we do believe affects the way we are. And then deciding to choose our belief more carefully and analyze it, investigate it critically, and develop wisdom about it. That's what, in each case, the theme is about that. It's a matter of examining, holding up what we do think we believe against what we're meditating on, in our experimenting with the Buddhist worldview, with the Bhutanese worldview. And the Bhutanese worldview is that each of us has come from an infinite past, and we have had infinite previous lives, and we have found each other in this life, and we're here together in this life. But we've had every other kind of life and every other kind of relationship in the past with each other. And we've also been every other kind of being. And so now that we are this special human being, it has a much more powerful meaning for us. It's like we have a whole evolutionary biological background, that we were all other kinds of much more crippled and much less aware and much less sensitive and much less capable beings. And we've gotten to be this amazing being that is human. It has these amazing abilities, an amazing ability to develop wisdom and understanding. And so we should be immensely appreciative of the opportunity we have in this embodiment, because it won't last forever. Try to keep the mind focused on how amazing you yourself are and what a fantastic opportunity it is to be yourself. Remember that if you think of yourself as a mere material product of atoms and molecules and DNA, genes, and sort of accidental and random, with no sort of reason for existence, but just sort of a random accident of complexity, matter reaching certain kind of complexity, and you becoming a being with the brain temporarily, and then you become non-existent, and then you'll never know you existed, and that's the end of you. If you have that picture of yourself, you really don't think of yourself as that important or valuable a thing. You think of yourself as some sort of accident, a temporary thing, so you might as well try to have a little fun or something. No long-term meaning and no long-term existence and no continuity after you die. So you can see logically if that is the underlying belief, and it is our underlying belief if we're educated in a scientific manner in our society, modern society. We think that's what reality, we don't think of it as a religious belief, we think of it as a reality belief. But that is a dharma means reality, that is reality belief. That is determines the way we treat ourselves, what we think we're capable of, and how much we respect ourselves. And even since whatever we think we are, we think other beings are just the same, ultimately how much we really respect them.
A sparsely populated country, Bhutan remained almost entirely isolated, both economically and culturally, until the late 20th century, allowing television for the first time in 1999. Now, it is trying to find the balance between preserving its heritage and independence while participating and prospering in the world. Bhutan's spirit fills its lush countryside, literally with prayer wheels and prayer flags sending out blessings to benefit all sentient beings. Continuing east through Bhutan towards Trongsa, we stop at the Chendebji Chorten, built in the 19th century in the style of the great stupas of Nepal, to explore this symbol of the mind of the Buddha.
Now, stupas in general are the symbol of the Buddha's mind. You know, the physical statue is a symbol of the Buddha's body, only a symbol. The texts are the symbols of the Buddha's speech, and a stupa is a symbol of the Buddha's mind. And when the Buddha passed away, attained parinirvana, or as they say, he withdrew his humanoid emanation, supreme humanoid emanation, that particular one. He said that they should take the ashes and the relics, which it had many relics, and put them in the stupas. So stupas are really considered very lucky and auspicious things because they remind one of the infinite and eternal presence of the mind of the Buddha everywhere. And the mind of the Buddha being present everywhere means that it's like the equivalent of a certain kind of mystical theism as being in the main cosmology within Buddhist societies, meaning that enlightened beings, that is to say, beings that care for us, care for living beings, care for sentient beings, are sort of everywhere. That awareness of those beings is everywhere present. So that is the thing, that one thinks that one feels that, somehow the mind of Buddha is with us type of thing. This is a wonderful thing to feel, It's very different. For example, bearing in mind what we were meditating on, about the preciousness of human life and about the importance of taking responsibility for one's own continuity. If you think back on your reality view as you were educated, as I was educated, our reality view as we were educated in Western schools, and I think Russian schools the same, actually, under materialism philosophy, we're taught by scientists, and we don't think we're getting religious teachings then, that the reality of it is that we don't really have a soul, and that we're just a brain, and then the brain makes us think we have a subjectivity, but when the brain ceases and the heart stops pumping and the brain doesn't get oxygen, then we die. And then that illusion of subjectivity is gone, and then there is nothing left from our continuity. We are enough. So therefore, in a way, and then at the base of the atom, and then now quantum physics gets really weird with the subatomic energies and wave particle, all that, but still, that wave and particle or whatever it is inside like a vacuum. So like the ground of everything is like a vacuum nothing. So our sort of sense of being and existing and running around doing things is based on an underlying feeling that what's really the real substratum of everything here is a blank nothingness. And actually, if we're really in a bad state, we can seek that blank nothingness as if it were a refuge. But when we're not in a bad state, we're sort of afraid of it. But it's kind of a dull thing anyway. Whatever our attitude is, like a dull thing is there. That's what reality is. It's like ultimately a dull thing with some illusory atoms and waves and particles and brains. People think they're running around, but nothing's really happening. Right? And people wrongly will think that Buddhism agrees with that, with the doctrine of voidness, that that's what voidness means. Wrong. Voidness means that nothing in the universe, including nothing, has any intrinsic essence, therefore doesn't exist substantially by itself. So it's empty of an independent essence. That's what emptiness is, or voidness. Everything is void of an independent essence, which means that everything exists as totally interwoven with every other thing. And among those things, nothing doesn't exist. That's the one thing that's not there and can never be, right? So there are all these some things all interwoven with no nothing. Nothing really is a kind of an idea, the opposite of everything we've ever known, which is some sort of something, right? So therefore, what is at the base in the Buddhist cosmos is the mind of the Buddha. All the Buddhas, there's no difference between the Buddhas at that level. They are indivisible. Every Buddha has the same body of truth, our infinite body of awareness, of clear light, what they call awareness, of compassion, of wisdom and compassion indivisible. And therefore, what is there at the ground of things, rather than a blank nothing, is a vast energy of care, an energy of love, an energy that cares for sentient being, that wants to buoy them and sustain them, that wants life to come out with a happy ending for the living being. So sort of when you let it all go, when you die, when you pass out, when you have those moments of the gaps of awareness, when you just lose control of everything, what embraces you, what you fall into, is not a vast abyss of blank nothing, is into this infinite sort of vast, inconceivable membrane of wisdom and compassion. That's the Buddhist world. So therefore, people who really like the Tibetan culture, Bhutanese culture, Mongolian culture, some aspects within Indian culture and some other aspects within the East Asian cultures, but very incomplete almost everywhere, most complete in the Himalayan and Mongolian cultures in the recent millennium, or maybe in ancient time in the actual presence of the Buddha or within the close core of the lineage. There's a wonderful expression, my favorite expression in all of Buddhism, in which I follow with the various other teachers. It's Nagarjuna's expression, sort of a description of the highest reality and the highest enlightenment of that reality is Shunyata Karuna Garbham is the Sanskrit word, or Tonit Ningje Ningbojen in Tibetan, which means voidness, the womb of compassion. Shunyata Karuna Garbha. Garbha means a womb. It's a wonderful term. It's a beautiful, Shunyata Karuna Garbham. So it's like this vast membrane containing everyone with care and concern. The stupa, therefore, reminds the beings, people in the cultures who have that cosmology and have that sense of physics, really. It's like, that's why I always talk about it in terms of science, because it isn't just what you learn in religion, like something you're supposed to believe. It's like what you think is real is what is important for Buddhism. And it's being critical of what you've been told is real. If you've been told something that doesn't make sense is real, then you're in a bad state. And you don't do that. For example, you don't walk across this lawn if you think it might be quicksand. You want to know that's really solid ground, and you ask the guide, and you ask people, and you throw a stone if you're in a jungle and it might be quicksand. You don't just run out on there, because you know that you're effective in your life when you know what's going on and what's real and what's unreal. So why are we taking idiots' word for what is real without giving us proper evidence for that? And people who tell us that they know that there's nothing there, what nonsense, They've discovered nothing and expect a reward? It's complete nonsense. They have no such authority, and they never found, nobody, and we can know by our common sense, one thing nobody will ever discover is nothing. For sure. We don't even have to start the search. We don't have to give them the grant. Nothing they won't find. Right? So that's common sense. So we use our human common sense. It's extremely precious. It's the basis of transcendent wisdom, of liberating Buddha wisdom is human common sense. It's the same. So we should use our common sense. Anyway, and we should build up reality, our reality picture out of what makes common sense to us. And we shouldn't accept on blind faith anything. Or nothing.
The second main theme is called the theme of the immediacy of death. So now we meditate on our death. Meditating on one's death has sort of three components traditionally. And the first of them is meditating on the certainty that we are going to die. And at first, maybe I think when I say that, well, obviously I know that. But then if I reflect a little deeper as I meditate, I realize that I kind of carry on, kind of acting like I'm just going to go on like this. And I don't really confront the fact. I'm in denial of the fact that my continuum, as I now experience it with this body, instrument of this body and these senses, and this brain that thinks, and heart that feels, it's not going to go on in this form past a point known as death. Maybe I'm not sure what will happen to me, but at least I know this continuum of my body-mind process that I now am in will definitely cease. Definitely. So I meditate on that. Put aside the denial. We might feel, if we do this meditation deeply and realistically, we might feel a little bit of fear, actually. Death, why it makes us afraid, is by dying, we lose all self-control. And we don't know what we're going to be. The scientists tell us we will simply cease to exist and be nothing. The Buddhists tell us we will go on in a continuum, a kind of soul continuum, as do other religions. And then they all differ on how that experience will be. But all kind of agree that whatever it is, we kind of won't be in control. So then we fear any kind of negative experience, of course. Pain, suffering. It isn't really the death so much that we fear as the pain and the suffering. And second, then, we meditate on the uncertainty of when that will be. No one really knows the exact time when they're going to die. And yet we know logically we could die any time. It could happen. So when we know that, the certainty that we're dying, going to die, and the certainty that we don't know when we're going to die, and it could actually therefore be any time, combined with our insight of the amazing opportunity of our embodiment, give us an intense feeling of wishing to use every moment of our life in the most positive possible way, to be as completely alive, as completely aware, as completely loving, as completely happy and blissful as we're contented and complete in every moment as we would want to be at the moment of our death. We don't want to be nurturing any bitternesses about anybody at the moment of our death. We don't want to be scheming any kind of worrying about some sort of unfinished affairs, business at the moment of our death. We want to be completely complete in this moment. At the moment of death, it is what is the most innermost place in our being that is of supreme importance. Where is our soul? If we mean by soul the most subtle, the innermost sort of part, like the CPU, central processing unit in our awareness, the deepest register of our consciousness, the source of our impulses and our reactions, whether that area of the deepest core in our heart is feeling constricted and tense and frightened and paranoid and angry and hostile and painful, or whether it's feeling relaxed and open and free and accepting and happy and therefore overflowing as love towards other beings and unafraid of anything because accepting of everything. That's how we want to be at the soul level, in our deepest mind, in our deepest core. And that is what is important. That is what we become. When we withdraw from identifying with our face, from identifying with our sense consciousness, because we no longer see, hear, smell, taste, touch, or think even anything, and we don't think in any language that we ever knew. Words are become useless and meaningless to us. It's some deep state in our being, like the deepest propensity, that is the only thing that is important, because that's what we become. That's what our soul is. This little being, a little sort of globe of light that is love and joy and bliss or it's like a spiky little hard thing all knotted up and terrified of any connection to anything. So what is at the core of our beings? But that is what is predominant at the moment of death. So as we meditate this theme, we are surprised, because by focusing on death, we come up again to the hint of freedom. We get a whiff of freedom, actually. True freedom, soul freedom, spiritual freedom, inner freedom, ultimate freedom, nirvanic freedom, freedom that is indivisible from bliss. When we feel this way, then all heavenly beings, enlightened beings, are one with us. And we just become a flow of light to all of the beings, and we merge and become one with all the beings.
One of the most striking physical features of Bhutan is its architecture. The traditional styles and colors of every building in the kingdom create visual harmony. Most spectacular are the dzongs. '17th-century structures built on a massive scale without the help of a single nail or drawing. Characterized by towering walls that enclose a complex of temples, offices, and housing for monks, dzongs serve as the spiritual, social, and government centers of their districts, reflecting their integration in Bhutanese society. Inside the dzongs, a profusion of art depicts the spiritual depth of Bhutanese life. Every wall, beam, and door offers patterns rich in color and symbolism. Each surface reveals a primary lesson in Buddhist morality and education. In this teaching at the Trongsa Dzong, Dr. Thurman explains the wheel of life, the Buddhist notion of reincarnation, and the cyclical nature of karma.
That's like a temporal one, where you go round the wheel, as you're born and reborn infinite numbers of times, you become a god, then you fall down, become human, then if you don't get enlightened as human, then you become a preta, then you go to hell, then you come back and up and down like that. And they use these paintings, and they're on every Buddhist temple, not only in Tibet and Bhutan, but in Thailand or anywhere, they have that wheel of life. And they use them to sort of just teach the people, by the picture. They give like a lecture on this is the future life, and, to give moral lessons and to get them used to the idea of being reborn and being a continuity. And then the divine realm is a pleasure realm. And you see they're bathing in a jacuzzi up there, see them? And hanging out. And then the human realm is this one. And here's a doctor seeing a patient, who's sick, and here's someone giving birth, a lady giving birth, and then there's there's an old man. Here's the monks, they're learning, studying. And then this is the realm of what are called the pretas, or they usually translate as hungry ghosts, but they're not really ghosts, they're actually like a life form. I sort of think of them more as a sort of insect-like. Here they look semi-humanoid, but they're really a very non-human being. They're like beings with huge stomachs, like the size of this fort. The stomach the size of this fort, then a long throat that's about a mile long. It's the size of a pin, and they're trying to get food and drink. Their main thing is hunger and thirst. And someone who has lived too much into lust, tends to be reborn in this type of preta realm, they call it. And then the animal kingdom is here, the animals without language, and that's from too much folly. The folly, the delusion, stupidity leads to the animal realm, where you lose language and you lose critical thinking and so on. And too much lust, cock thing leads that way. And then hatred leads you down to the hell realm. This is hell. This is the king of the dead, the same deity that is the red one holding everything in his mouth, down there judging the dead. And then there being, this one here has just died and is being judged, and there's a white and a dark. People who are reciting the good and the bad deeds, on a very sort of popular level. Then they're assigned to different, rather nasty, cold. There's 8 cold hells, 8 hot hells, 8 crushing hells, and 8 cutting hells. and they're really nasty. Ooh, they're very vivid. Here, look, there's spiked on some spiky mountains, and they're showing their own views of it. This is where the leaves of the trees are like knives, and people are pierced by them. And this is really dreadful because, oh dear. And then here they're boiling, like Dante's sort of Inferno, so to speak. It is possible that it wasn't the Protestants, but it was the Buddhists who invented hell, actually. Folklorists and historians, intellectual historians, do trace to ancient India around the Buddha's time. And it's logical, actually. I understood it a couple of years ago in a certain way, that at the time, about 2,500 years ago, in the recent cycle of history, when the level of technology and the growth of population and the development of cities, a certain degree of individualism became possible in different human societies in Eurasia. And the individual opened up, the human individual had to got out of tribal mythological sort of cosmoses and got into the idea of being able to become a Buddha or to evolve in a certain type of way. Then, with this sort of, unlimited positive potential, you could say, for the individual, like become a god, in fact, beyond more than a god. A Buddha is more than a god. So at the same time that there's that unlimited positive potential, there gets the fear of unlimited negative potential. Once you're yourself dealing with the universe, once you're aware of your situation as you versus the universe, then it can get infinitely bad. So then the idea of the hells comes up. You're no longer controlled, in other words, by unthinking mythological structures that you unreflectingly accept as sort of the way the world is, and then you do what you do. You're just part of the collective, and you just go ahead. Once you're thinking of, like, what should I do with my life? What is the meaning of my life? What am I going to do with it? Then the sort of cautionary idea of, gee, I'm out here on my own in the cosmos and it can get infinitely bad comes to you as the horizon of becoming infinitely fantastic. So I think that's where these ideas actually came from. And then on the outermost rim are what are called the 12 links of dependent origination, which is the cause of the samsaric life. And it was a very important sort of thing to meditate on. Apparently, they say if you meditate on that and really understand that, then you attain the Prateka Buddha, the type of Buddha who obtains Buddhahood without having another Buddha teacher, attains Buddhahood by meditating on the 12 links of dependent origination. And the first one is that blind person there who's walking. That's ignorance. And then these are formations, mental formations based on ignorance. And this is consciousness, the monkey. And this is what's called name and form. And the division of things into subjects and objects, and it goes around like that, And finally, it ends up with old age and death. That guy there is death, old age and death. This is birth. This is existence. This is grasping, craving, contact. Someone with an arrow in his eye, and the sixth sense fields, and so forth. So this representation. It is said that the Buddha drew it in the sand, the basic six-poked wheel, was the central thing. And so it was the one thing he ever sort of wrote down or drew was the six-fold wheel. And then the 12 links of dependent origination on the rim. So it's a very famous thing, and it sort of gives a sense of the cosmology, the sort of journey in the samsara, endlessly going up and down. Even the divine realm, you fall back down again.
Never once conquered nor colonized, Bhutan's development and its people's deep sense of nationhood has long been rooted in its monarchy. Recognizing happiness as the ultimate desire of every person, King Jigme Singye Wangchu decided collective happiness of society should be the ultimate goal of development. He introduced gross national happiness, GNH, as Bhutan's guiding philosophy in 1972. In our interconnected world faced with unprecedented challenges, the collapse of economic, environmental, and social systems, gross national happiness offers a framework to make society resilient, where material wants and spiritual growth are addressed in a sustainable environment with good governance. This contrasts with the standard measure for a country's progress, gross domestic product, or GDP, which counts only the market value of goods and services exchanged for money. Gross domestic product was never intended to be a measure of well-being. It was developed to facilitate production during World War II. We complete our journey in the capital city of Thimphu, where Dr. Thurman addresses the Bhutan Chamber of Commerce and Industry on the challenges to Bhutan's development of gross national happiness.
The wonderful kingdom of Bhutan, which I think this is my 6th visit to, which is too few, is actually trying to defend itself from what I would consider global insanity of development by coming up with the concept of gross national happiness His Majesty came up with, which is basically, I think, really a kind of defensive. I mean, it's a real, true concept, but in a way, phrased in the terms of sort of international development lingo, it's a defensive concept against the sort of utilitarian notion of development, which is maximization of profit and short-term profit, maximization of material pleasures and comforts, and to hell with the consequences type of thing, which is the way the planet is being treated today. Now, the pursuit of what is Buddhism? So in that light, what is Buddhism? My point here, my thesis is, Buddhism is itself the pursuit of happiness. It is. I don't know if it's gross. It might be more subtle. I don't know if it's national. It might be individual. But it is the pursuit of happiness. The third noble truth of the Buddha, contrary to how many people misunderstand Buddhism, it is the third noble truth of the Buddha's original teaching that is the really great noble truth. That is the truth for which Buddha is truly remembered, which made it a Buddhist movement. And that noble truth is the cessation of suffering. It is nirvana. What Buddha said, the only way you can understand that your reality is nirvana is by your understanding that it is nirvana, by wisdom. Wisdom is produced by education, by learning, then by reflecting on what you've learned, debating about it with others, and then finally by meditating. When meditation is a true inquiry, it's a true development of understanding, not just an emptying and a blankness of mind. So since Buddha taught that the way to that salvation from suffering is by understanding, his movement is more an educational movement than a religious movement, actually. When we decrease the exaggeration of self-centeredness in a metaphysical way, just a little, and we know that we're just interwoven with all of reality, and we're no longer struggling against it, reality emerges as bliss. To do that, to find out that I'm not the absolute Bob Thurman here, I'm just the relational Bob here, is a process of education. I have to slowly go against my own habitual instinctual feeling of I'm so it, and I have to learn about my nature. I have to analyze down to the atoms and the subatomic energies and the concepts and the imagination. And then as I learn that, I have to reflect and doubt about it, because I strongly still feel, especially when I'm mad or when I'm greedy or when I'm really paranoid or depressed, I get more and more absolute about myself. So I have to bring those things together in my experience and meditate, and then finally I will have wisdom to realize that. And it's an educational process. But it's not an infinite, it's not a far away thing. Any human being can learn that. Any human being can understand that. That is the Buddhist educational movement. If that's Buddhism, then naturally it would be a Buddhist country in the current situation on this planet that would come up with a brilliant idea of gross national happiness as an index of development, of social well-being, of national condition. And in a way come up with that defensively to defend itself against what is happening on the planet today, which is basic lemming-like insanity. This insanity that's happening, what is it? Imperialism and colonialism are supposed to be over. But actually, if we're realistic, they're not really over. They're because the people who did the imperialism and colonialism can't really get over it. The new mode of colonialism is economic. It is not sending armies in the same way, unless people don't pay back the loans. They don't send the armies. They just send bank loans. And then you can't pay them back. And then they take over your economy, and then they start to extract your resources. Remember, colonialism originally was not just about owning territory. It was about getting the resources and the labor of the people and taking advantage and extracting that from those places of your colonies. That's what colonialism was about. And then they withdrew from that after the World War, but economically it still goes on under the name of development, basically. And we're going to help you, and you're going to give up your old culture, and you're going to give up all this, and we're going to support. And the way it works is we'll support a small elite, And that elite, and it'll be democracy, so therefore it could be anybody, but they will be the people who will be loyal to the economic powers, and they will take the loans on behalf of their people, and then their people will be forced to try to pay them back, and then they will be our slaves, and then we will take their trees, and we will take their minerals, and we will take their chocolate, and we will take their coffee, and we will take everything. And we will then use them as also export platforms to make products without paying wages to our own people in our own countries. And this is still going on, is the point. So that kind of development is not really development of a country, it's the destruction of a country. How else can we explain the fact that after 50 years of all this wonderful IMF and World Bank and wonderful altruistic activity coming from the former imperial world, the former colonialized world is in a tremendous mess. So in that context, for His Majesty, the King of Bhutan, to take his inspiration from Buddhism and to say that in our case, development to us means developing the happiness of our people, at least as much, if not more than, developing our economic utility and economic efficiency, is a really marvelous statement. Buddhism always had an economic ethic. The economic ethic was that economics is not the most important thing in life. Economics is just there for sustenance of the human embodiment, and the purpose of human life is what? Is happiness, actually. That's what Buddhist economy is about. The idea of internal happiness, of emotional well-being, as you read again and again in the Bhutanese officials writing about gross national happiness, that's the key to the happiness of us people, is their own state of internal well-being and internal happiness. When we're in a depressed mood, we can be in paradise. I guess, what's that? The Amman $1,200 a day paradise. We can be in paradise and we'll be miserable. They can massage and they can do this and that and drink and we're just miserable. And we'll be grumpy and angry and terrible. Or we can be really happy and we can be rolling around somewhere, like working in the mud, planting potatoes, chasing the cranes, whatever. And we'll be perfectly okay. Someone can be bothering us and we'll be happy. It doesn't bother. It goes water off a duck's back when you're in a good mood. So then the key is, society should be arranged to maximize the good moods of its people. And that's what Buddhism is about. So therefore, this defense is really critical. And then all of the things the 4 pillars that you have put forth are really wonderful. Your pillars are sustainable, just socioeconomic development, conservation of environment, preservation and promotion of culture, and promotion of good governance. Those are said to be the 4 pillars of gross national happiness. And this is where I want to complain, because to have sustainable development, conserve your environment, preserve your culture, and promote good governance, all of that requires Enlightenment education. If those are the pillars, the foundation has to be Enlightenment education. And the time when Enlightenment education could be reserved for the monastic body, this day is gone. This will not do. This will not work. The laity has to be informed and has to be educated in an enlightened manner. The school curriculum, I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, is based on the Indian standard system. And the science and technology, therefore, that's taught is quote-unquote modern science. And that means that the reality picture that the young generation of Bhutanese is informed by is a reality picture totally at odds with the reality picture of Buddhism. And therefore, to those people educated in that way and told and even implied by their elders and by the society, since that's what they're taught in the government-supported schools, that's an accurate and valid reality picture. For example, just on the one major point, which is so key to Buddhism, the reality picture that you have no future life, that you are a material entity yourself, that your notion of spirituality is a nice thing for faith and for making you feel good on Sunday or on holidays or in festivals or whatever, but it doesn't really exist. Modern reality knows that it doesn't exist. See, this is where Buddhism is wrongly pigeonholed as a religion, and you Bhutanese shouldn't accept that. Buddhism is also a science, and it has its own reality picture. The Buddhist reality picture is not a religious reality picture, and it's not based on blind faith. The continuum of energy, of mind, as like the continuum of energy of matter, is something that has been observed for thousands of years by millions of people in hundreds of cultures. So when I say that Buddhism has a reality view and a scientific view, and it should be in the school in that way, I'm not comparing it to blind faith religious mythologies. I'm comparing it to the scientific theories that are based on experience and evidence and reasoning, because that's what Buddhist view of reality is based on. I was reading in one of the recent things about the gross national happiness that going over to a more private sector development, talking now in economic terms, and allowing more room in the government getting itself out of private sector development, this will allow more entrepreneurial initiative to develop among the Bhutanese, and it'll be more efficient, it'll be wonderful, sort of real old development utilitarian talk. And then, oh no, but they won't go berserk, the Bhutanese, they won't cut all those forests, they won't change all their laws, they won't pollute the place because they're Buddhists. Because that Buddhism will restrain the excessive greed and obsession with profit that is destroying the industrial countries. But then they're teaching the younger generation materialism. So they're undercutting the reality picture of Buddhism that would give them a feeling of realistic behavior when they restrain that desire for profit. And they will just be thinking they are foolish, and they're following mythologies, and they're foolish old lamas and foolish old lay people and dashos who think the lamas are cute. That's what they will think. And the only antidote to that, you can't just tell them you mustn't think that, is to change the curriculum of the education. And to put the Madhyamaka into the math, the reading, writing, and arithmetic. Put the Prajna Paramita in there. Put the karma in there next to materialistic biology. Put the Jatakas in there along with the Walt Disney stories. They are the original Walt Disney stories, after all. And so this, to me, is the absolute crossroad, critical thing in the Tibetan Buddhist societies, in the Bhutanese society today. By allowing the modernistic curriculum to affect the minds of the young, unchallenged and unquestioned, as if lack of soul was a discovery coming from modernity, lack of future life was a discovery, lack of, therefore, realism about being selfless in your ethics and non-self concern and other concern and compassion and so forth. A lack of possibility to become a Buddha. Modern people do not think that anybody can become enlightened. If I went in my university to the president's office and said, Eureka, I was just in Bhutan, I had a wonderful experience of shunyata, I'm enlightened, he would prescribe medication and not meditation. And he would have me examined. And you can't do that. So there you're teaching them a reality theory contrary to the very basis of the spiritual and moral and ethical theory that you want them to adopt in their lifestyle and to guard and safeguard the precious heritage and culture of Bhutan. And it will not work. And yet I don't care if the monks think, well, we can't confuse the laity with Madhyamaka, some difficult topic. We can't have stuff about selflessness or shunyata. They can't deal with it. They'll get all confused. They might become they might join a motorcycle gang or something if they think it's all shunyata. Who knows what they're going to say? But you can't listen to that. And it will be good for the monastic body if they are not monopolizing the scientific teachings of Buddhism and the lay people are learning it. The lay people will be asking Geshe-la some questions. Instead of just lolus and have some tea, it might be lolus, have some tea. What is the selflessness? Why should I have compassion? What is the bodhicitta mind? What is the vow of bodhisattva, etc.? And it'll be much more lively, and the monastic body will get a little bit pumped up in their studies. And they will be deeper, and there'll be more kidzok, people, and so forth. And the country will shine like a lamp. As with everything, it requires learning, and understanding is the key thing. And we're all capable of that understanding, and a society can centralize that. That's in my book, I use the term, and this we'll probably end here, I use the term educationalism, meaning that the purpose of life is education. The human being is a learning machine. Our greatest pleasure is when we learn something, something completely new. When we laugh, actually, from the Buddhist point of view, why do we laugh? Because something comes that doesn't fit in our expectation. It surprises us in some way. And then the body actually shakes. And that's the way we open to the new thing, by laughing. That's what laughing is. Laughing isn't just it's like some kind of exercise. Laughing is when something won't fit in your structure of expectation, and then it's like something strange, and then you laugh to open up your mind and heart to it. And that makes you happy because you're a bigger being when you open your mind and your heart. Do you follow? So then you're more in the moment in a new way. You've changed. You're just being in the moment, yes, but you also have changed yourself in that moment. In other countries, that's the only reason India is a leader, as I'm saying. It's not like there was just one place where the truth emerged. The truth is everywhere in the ground. The truth is in the air. But it's just that in a society that was more wealthy and less militaristic, and where Buddha chose to be, he chose it for that reason, and women were less suppressed. Women were more powerful, and they were more equal, and the mother goddess was more of a thing in India. They didn't bury the mother goddess under that weird, horny bachelor Yahweh, who's so mad at everybody because they took his girlfriend away. Yahweh, the Western god. Do you know what I mean? The great goddess of Egypt and of Babylon, they buried her, and she made her into a holy ghost. So then he's sitting there with no one to calm him down. Naturally, he gets overheated. Burns up bushes and people and whatever. So India wasn't like that. So therefore, that's why we have a lot to learn from India and its extended cultures like Bhutan, Tibet, and other places. They have much more yogas. They allow the human being to have much more potential and to realize that potential. But it's not a matter of converting. We can't convert to yoga. We can't convert to enlightenment. We can be enlightened Christian, Jew, secular, whatever we are, if we open ourselves to more understanding. That's all. So that was it today. That was it. We didn't meditate today.
That's okay.
Right? We meditated with eyes wide open.